What do you know about dietary inflammation and visceral fat? This is part one of a three-part series. Hello, this is Dr. Gerry Dembrowski, co-founder of the patent-pending, award-winning 20-Liter program. You can learn more about 20-Liter at 20liter.com, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to take you on a journey through dietary inflammation. This is part one of a three-part series on dietary inflammation. Some of what I'll be talking about may start out a little bit complicated, but hang in there. I will simplify it as we move along. Let me ask you this. Do you want to know what causes fat storage? Do you want to know why it's so hard to lose weight? Do you want to know why it's so easy to regain weight after you lose it? Our journey to answer these questions begins in 1832 with Adolphe Quetelet, a Belgian mathematician who developed a passionate interest in the average man. He devised a mathematical equation that described his observation of how weight increases as the square of height, known as the Quetelet index. In 1972, it was renamed by Ansel Keys, an American physiologist, to the Body Mass Index. A healthy BMI for adult men and women is considered between 18.5 and 24.9. A person is considered overweight with a BMI between 25 and 29.9, and with a BMI of 30 or higher, a person is considered to be obese. According to the Center for Disease Control's 2016 statistics, approximately two-thirds of adults are overweight with a BMI of 25 or more, and approximately 38% of the adult U.S. population is considered obese with a BMI of greater than 30. While BMI can be helpful in the general sense, grouping people into a category based merely on height and weight alone does little to accurately describe the impact of your weight loss or weight gain on your health. BMI takes your entire body mass into consideration and not the individual components that make up your body's overall weight. One tremendously important aspect not considered by body mass index is the different types of fat, and all fats are not created equally. When you use BMI and weight alone to determine your progress, you'll never know what is causing either number to decrease. Take, for example, you lose 20, 30, 40 pounds on a program. Well, 1 gallon of water weighs a little over 8 pounds. 3 gallons of water weighs about 25 pounds. Your body can lose 3 gallons of water over a short period of time and not give it a second thought. What happens with a lot of diets is they cause you to lose water first, causing the scale to decrease quickly. Then you plateau. Then your body will lose carbohydrates and you plateau again. Then you'll lose proteins, usually muscle mass, then plateau again. If you're only using BMI and the number on the scale to determine your weight loss progress, how are you going to distinguish between your body losing water, carbohydrates, and protein versus fat, which is what you really want to lose, and one very specific type of fat? Now that we're on the topic of fat, did you know there are 3 different types of fat? The first one is what's called structural fat. This is the fat that creates a cushion or a padding between various organs. It's the packing material that wraps your organs and keeps them from banging into each other. It keeps your skin smooth and taut. Structural fat provides the spongy cushion between the bones of your feet and the surface you're walking on. Without it, you wouldn't be able to walk across the floor. Did you know about a quarter of your nervous system is made from fat? It's called myelin. It increases the speed at which your brain perceives various sensations. Electrical impulses traveling along a non-myelinated nerve can travel as slow as about 2 miles an hour. Electrical impulses traveling along a myelinated nerve can travel at about 300 miles per hour or more. The second type of fat is called essential fat. This is the normal reservoir of fuel from which your body can freely draw from when your body requires extra energy. It's distributed all over the body and packs high caloric value into the smallest quantity of fat. This type of fat provides a normal reservoir of fuel for muscular activity and the maintenance of body temperature. This is the typical place where your body stores extra calories that your body doesn't need. And the third type of fat is the most important pathological or disease-causing type of fat, called non-essential or visceral fat. There are 8 storage locations, and all locations are entirely abnormal fat deposits. These fat storage areas are not available to your body as nutritional energy sources like essential fat. Once your body begins to store visceral fat, all you can do is store in those areas. You can't get rid of visceral fat through typical diet and exercise. The first visceral fat location is called mesenteric visceral fat. The second visceral fat location is called omental visceral fat. The third visceral fat location is called periaortic visceral fat. The fourth visceral fat location is called neck visceral fat. The fifth visceral fat location is called gluteofemoral visceral fat. The sixth visceral fat location is called intermuscular visceral fat. The seventh visceral fat location is called epicardial visceral fat. And the eighth visceral fat location is called gonadal visceral. Each visceral fat deposit is different in function depending on location and on its proximity to various organs. Depending on the visceral fat location, it exerts a local effect on the nearby organs and a systemic effect. Visceral fat is very different from any other fat in your body. Visceral fat on a molecular level is a highly secretory organ compared to other types of fat. Visceral fat is capable of secreting large quantities of pro-inflammatory chemicals called adipokines. There is overwhelming evidence supporting a direct involvement of visceral fat deposits in the development of many metabolic and immune-related diseases, including, but not limited to, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, inflammatory bowel disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and metabolic syndrome. The size and distribution of visceral fat deposits seems to be more important than the total quantity of other types of fat for determining the risk of developing obesity-associated diseases. Researchers are now beginning to understand the role of inflammatory chemicals produced by visceral fat on both a local and a systemic level, and how it plays a bigger role in obesity and metabolic diseases. It's also well accepted that inflammation has a significant role in the development of atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. However, the complex role it has in obesity is just beginning to be understood. Recent research suggests a person's diet strongly influences how fat is stored, appetite control, food cravings, eating behaviors, gut and brain inflammation. This is a dramatic advancement towards understanding how people end up gaining weight, why it is so difficult to lose, and reasons why people regain the weight after traditional dieting. Inflammation is an important signal that tells your brain there's something wrong and it needs to be fixed. There is a condition described in the scientific literature called dietary inflammation. It is caused by the foods in this country being heavily processed. Pretty much all the vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, enzymes are all removed. We're left with a fortified food substitute in a fancy wrapper. These prepackaged processed foods are highly refined, are high in sugar, and high in fats. These refined foods directly cause inflammation in specific areas of your body and cause symptoms that are felt throughout your entire body. The effects of high fat and high sugar diets, or dietary inflammation, are twofold. The first part of your body affected by excessive fats and sugars is your gut. Dietary inflammation has a direct impact on 3 important hormones regulating your appetite. The first hormone is called ghrelin, which is produced and released mainly by the stomach, with small amounts released from the small intestine, pancreas, and brain. Ghrelin is called the hunger hormone because it stimulates your appetite, increases food intake, and promotes fat storage. The second is called cholecystokinin. It's synthesized and secreted by cells in the first segment of your small intestine called your duodenum. Cholecystokinin causes the release of digestive enzymes from the pancreas and release of bile from the gallbladder, and acts as a hunger suppressant. The third is peptide YY. It's released from the cells in your ileum and colon in response to food. In your circulatory system, peptide YY reduces appetite in your gut and brain. One chemical causes you to eat more and stores fat, and 2 that suppress hunger. These molecules create a feedback mechanism between your gut and your brain, forming a chemical pathway that links your gut to your brain and regulates how much you eat or not eat, and whether the food you're eating gets stored as fat or not. Think of this feedback mechanism or chemical pathway as the superhighway between your gut and your brain. This superhighway that allows your gut to talk with your brain has 3 different models of cars that travel along the highway called ghrelin, cholecystokinin, and peptide YY. The car called ghrelin tells your brain you need to eat more food and store fat, and the cars called cholecystokinin and peptide YY tell your brain to stop eating and stop storing fat. Dietary inflammation not only changes the way your gut talks to your brain, but also causes changes to the bacteria that live in your gut. Everyone's heard the yogurt commercials. The yogurt favors the good bacteria and suppresses the bad. Well, dietary inflammation caused by high fat and high sugar foods directly affects the bacteria that live in your stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Healthy gut bacteria produces approximately 15,000 different types of proteins. These proteins play a major role in good health. The good bacteria produce neurotransmitters that act on the central nervous system, produce proteins that prevent infection, produce proteins that detoxify environmental toxins. Good bacteria produce chemicals that prevent inflammation. They produce proteins that help break down your food and help convert that food into other nutrients and play an important role in how your metabolism works and how you store fat. The chronic inflammation caused by dietary inflammation suppresses the good bacteria and favors the bad bacteria that live in your gut. A shift in the quantity of bad bacteria versus good bacteria is a major contributing factor to obesity, associated diseases, and visceral fat storage. Studies have shown when the gut bacteria from an obese individual is transplanted into a lean animal, the lean animal will become obese. There is a difference in 1,900 gut proteins produced between lean and obese people. There are 780 gut proteins that are more abundant in obese individuals and 1,100 gut proteins that are less abundant in obese individuals. This suggests there is gut bacteria that can make you fat, also implies there is gut bacteria that can make you thin. There is also research that shows that if an obese person loses weight, their gut bacteria shifts towards the gut bacteria profile of a lean person. Okay, I know I've given you a lot of information, so let's recap what we know. There is a chemical superhighway between your gut and your brain. This allows your brain to control hunger and cravings. We also know the bacteria in your gut also controls hunger, cravings, and inflammation. We also know there is a difference between the bacteria in an obese person and a lean person. We also know both the chemical superhighway between your gut and your brain and the bacteria in your gut are both influenced by dietary inflammation caused by high fat and high sugar foods. This causes an increase in the number of ghrelin cars traveling from the gut along the superhighway, telling your brain to eat more and store more fat. At the same time, Dietary inflammation in the gut causes an increased growth of the bad bacteria. This causes dramatic changes in how our body regulates hunger, cravings, and inflammation. The bad bacteria produces about 1,500 different pro-inflammatory chemicals that get circulated throughout your entire body, targeting your muscles, your bones, your gut, your fat cells, and specific parts of your brain. This brings us to the second part of your body that's affected by dietary inflammation caused by high fat and high sugar foods. Research has shown high fat and high sugar diets cause low-grade brain inflammation in the part of your brain that controls your metabolism called your hypothalamus and your hippocampus. Your hypothalamus regulates several important systems, including electrolyte and fluid balances, body temperature, blood pressure, behavior, endocrine functions, growth, development, circadian rhythms, and your metabolism. Your hippocampus is involved in storing long-term memory and connecting those memories with your emotions. It also controls behavior inhibition, or the ability to inhibit responses that have previously been learned. I'll go into more detail about the hypothalamus and the hippocampus in part 2 of this series. For simplicity, we'll say high fat and high sugar diets cause dietary inflammation in the part of your brain that controls fat storage and cravings. When inflammation occurs in these parts of your brain, it causes an interesting phenomenon I call the Chinese food syndrome. Let's take a little time to review. Remember the chemical superhighway between your gut and your brain? The car called ghrelin makes you hungry and stores fat. And the cars called cholecystokinin and peptide YY make you stop eating. The dietary inflammation produced by high fat and high sugar diets creates a roadblock in our chemical superhighway, causing an increase in the number of ghrelin cars traveling from the gut to the brain, telling it to eat more and store fat. High fat and high sugar foods also favor the bad bacteria in your gut, producing about 1,500 different pro-inflammatory chemicals that get circulated throughout your entire body, targeting your muscles, your bones, your gut, specific parts of your brain controlling your metabolism, and your fat cells. When dietary inflammation affects that part of your brain that controls your metabolism, it causes your body not to know when it's full after a meal and causes you to crave foods that are high in fat and high in sugar, or what we call junk food. This is what I call the Chinese food syndrome. Are you starting to see the connection and the development of a vicious inflammatory cycle caused by dietary inflammation? But wait. Just when you thought you had dietary inflammation figured out, there's more. As dietary inflammation becomes chronic and you continue to consume more and more calories, another phenomenon occurs. The extra calories your body doesn't use for energy are, yep, you guessed it, stored as fat. When your body reaches a BMI of 30 or more, your fat cells begin to look like a balloon that's going to pop. As your fat cells continue to expand, they take on another function, that of an endocrine organ or hormone-producing gland. When your body reaches a BMI of 30 or more, your fat cells start to produce about 50 different pro-inflammatory chemicals that are circulated throughout your entire body. This is how your fat cells cause heart disease, cancer, and type 2 diabetes. These pro-inflammatory chemicals that are produced by your fat cells get circulated throughout your entire body, targeting your muscles, bones, your gut, that part of your brain that controls your metabolism, cravings, fat storage, and your fat cells themselves. Chronic dietary inflammation has a profound effect on how your gut communicates with your brain, the balance between good and bad bacteria, and the parts of your brain that controls your metabolism, cravings, and fat storage. All of these changes lead up to the Chinese food syndrome that causes your body to crave high fat and high sugar foods, causing an increase in hunger and additional fat storage. The increase in calories consumed are stored as fat, causing your fat cells to increase in size so that they look like a balloon that's going to explode. This causes your fat cells to produce about 50 different pro-inflammatory chemicals that get circulated throughout your entire body. That's how your fat cells cause heart disease, cancer, and type 2 diabetes. Now you know how diets high in sugar and fat cause dietary inflammation, leading to a vicious cycle of inflammation that results in fat storage, visceral fat accumulation, and disease. And this is why being overweight or obese is not because of a lack of self-control or lack of willpower. This is also why it's so hard to control cravings. It's all linked to chronic inflammation caused by high fat and high sugar foods causing dietary inflammation in very specific parts of your body. It is very important for you to understand chronic dietary inflammation is difficult to detect, difficult to treat, and more difficult to fully resolve. All areas affected by dietary inflammation are sensitive to re-injury. Even though the organs and systems may have begun the process of repair, they are still predisposed to repeat damage resulting in reaccumulation of fat, redevelopment of symptoms, and disease. The reality is, if an individual returns to the same dietary habits before fully healing from dietary inflammation, they'll regain the fat. Symptoms will return, and they will almost certainly gain a significant amount of additional fat very quickly. If the dietary inflammation has resolved and a person returns to a diet high in fats and sugars, it could take several months or years to regain the fat and symptoms of disease to return. There are no easy ways. Maintaining fat loss will require constant vigilance. Long-term maintenance of good health will require constant healthy food choices to avoid dietary inflammation triggers, and ensuring total caloric intake is at or below the recommended levels, especially if you're not going to incorporate exercise into your lifestyle. I hope it's become very clear that diets high in fat and sugar will cause dietary inflammation that affect the brain, gut, and fat cells, causing a vicious cycle of inflammation which in turn strongly influences the accumulation of visceral fat. The present dieting landscape is filled with gimmick diets, powders, bars, pills, shakes, cookies, and prepackaged foods that aim at an easy and quick fix to lowering the number on the scale. None of them address the causes of the problem, which is dietary inflammation. Only a small percentage of the people can maintain their weight loss long term after discontinuing the powders, bars, pills, shake, cookies, and prepackaged foods, with the majority regaining more than the weight they lost. The next time you hear a commercial about a weight loss program, you now have the knowledge necessary to ask, is this program focusing only on lowering the number on the scale, or is this program addressing the complex issues caused by dietary inflammation? These are my suggestions for you or someone you know who decides it's time to take control of your health and get rid of the disease-causing visceral fat. First, keep in mind what you've learned today. Second, determine if the program you're considering is only decreasing the number on the scale, or are you losing fat? Third, are the program's protocols and foods addressing the cause of the problem, or are they contributing to the problem of dietary inflammation? Fourth, is the program easy for you to follow and manage after the program has ended? Let's wrap this discussion up with 3 simple questions. 1, why has overweight and obesity reached epidemic proportions? You got it, dietary inflammation. Question number 2, why is heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome running rampant? You guessed it, dietary inflammation. Question number 3, what causes visceral fat accumulation? You got it, dietary inflammation. This is Dr. Dembrowski, co-founder of the patent-pending, award-winning 20-liter program. Thank you for taking the time to learn. For more information on how the 20-liter program helps combat dietary inflammation, please visit our website at 20liter.com, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. Thank you for listening to part 1 of a 3-part series on dietary inflammation. I look forward to continuing our discussion in part 2.